Imagine a city whose very survival depended on the unbroken chastity of just 6 women. In ancient Rome, these were the Vestal Virgins, priestesses of Vesta, goddess of the hearth and the eternal flame that symbolized the life of the eternal city itself. Chosen as young girls from Rome's noblest families, they took a vow of absolute chastity that lasted 3 decades. They lived in luxury, wielded extraordinary privileges, and held the power to pardon condemned men with a single touch. But if even the slightest suspicion arose that one of them had broken that sacred vow, the consequences were unimaginable. The punishment? Not a swift execution, but something far more chilling. Being buried alive in an underground chamber within the city's sacred boundaries, sealed away with only a small lamp, a bed, bread, water, and milk, left to starve slowly in darkness, so that no Roman hand would spill her sacred blood. Her alleged lover? Publicly beaten to death in the Forum. These Vestal Virgin sex trials were rare, but when they occurred, often during times of crisis, war, or ominous prodigies, they shook Rome to its core, exposing fears about divine anger, political intrigue, and the fragile purity that Rome believed protected its empire. In one infamous case from the late Republic, 3 Vestals were accused in a scandal that implicated prominent aristocrats, leading to executions and even additional human sacrifices to appease the gods. Centuries later, under Emperor Domitian, the chief Vestal Cornelia herself was condemned to this horrific fate, protesting her innocence all the way to the tomb. Today, we'll uncover the full story, the origins of this extraordinary order, the daily lives of these powerful women, the signs that triggered suspicion, the secretive trial procedures, the most shocking historical cases, the brutal punishments, and what these trials reveal about Roman society, religion, and the control of female sexuality. By the end, you'll understand why the Vestal Virgins were both Rome's greatest honor and its most terrifying enigma. If you're fascinated by the hidden dramas of the ancient world, hit that subscribe button right now to join Ancient Odyssey for more deep dives into history's most captivating stories. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Let's embark on this journey together. The story of the Vestal Virgins begins deep in Rome's legendary past, long before the city rose to imperial greatness. According to ancient tradition, the cult of Vesta and her priestesses had roots even earlier, in the nearby Latin town of Alba Longa, where the Vestals guarded the sacred hearth of the royal family. When Rome was founded, or so the myth goes, Rhea Silvia, a Vestal Virgin forced into service by her uncle, gave birth to the twins Romulus and Remus after being visited by the god Mars. Her punishment for breaking her vow of chastity foreshadowed the severe consequences that would define the order for centuries. It was Rome's second king, the pious Numa Pompilius, who formally established the Vestal Order in the Eternal City during the 7th century BCE. Seeking to anchor Roman religion in the stability of the home and the hearth, Numa built the first temple of Vesta in the Forum and appointed the initial priestesses, at first 2, then 4, to tend its eternal flame. This flame was no ordinary fire. It represented the life force of Rome itself. If it ever went out, the city faced divine displeasure and potential disaster. Later, under the 6th king, Servius Tullius, the number was increased to 6, the standard that would endure throughout most of Roman history. These women were not mere attendants. They formed a full-time collegium, a sacred college, unique among Roman priesthoods for its all-female composition and lifelong dedication. Their creation reflected a profound Roman belief. The purity and continuity of the state depended on the inviolable chastity of these chosen virgins, who symbolically kept the hearth of the entire Roman people burning bright. This ancient foundation set the stage for the extraordinary lives they would lead, lives of privilege, power, and peril. With the order established, the process of choosing new Vestals became one of Rome's most solemn rituals. The Pontifex Maximus, Rome's chief priest, a position later held by emperors themselves, selected the candidates. Girls between the ages of 6 and 10 were chosen from patrician families at first, though later plebeian daughters, and even those of freedmen, were eligible when suitable patricians were scarce. 20 candidates were typically nominated, all freeborn, with both parents living and free from any physical or mental defects. The final selection was made by lot in a public ceremony. The Pontifex Maximus would take the chosen girl by the hand and declare, Te amata capio, which means, I take you, beloved one, in a formula that symbolized her transition from daughter to priestess. This moment marked her captio, or taking. She was led from her family home to the Atrium Vesti, the grand residence beside the Temple of Vesta. There, she was formally emancipated from her father's authority, becoming sui juris, that is, legally independent, a status rare for Roman women. Her hair was cut short in a ritual offering, and she donned the distinctive white stola and suffibulum, or head covering of the Vestal. The initiation bound her to a 30-year term. The first decade spent learning the sacred rites under the guidance of senior Vestals, the second performing them, and the third teaching the newcomers. From that day forward, she belonged not to a family, but to the state and to Vesta herself, a life of extraordinary honor, yet one shadowed by the unbreakable vow that would define everything to come. Once initiated, the Vestal Virgin entered a world of ritual precision and remarkable freedom. Her primary duty was to guard the sacred fire in the Temple of Vesta, an eternal flame that must never be extinguished, for its life symbolized Rome's own. The 6 Vestals took turns watching over it day and night. If negligence allowed it to go out, the offender faced whipping in a darkened room, followed by elaborate rituals to relight it using pure materials. Beyond the fire, they maintained the temple's inner sanctum, the Pinus Vesti, where sacred objects like the Palladium, a protective image said to have fallen from heaven, were kept. They fetched ritually pure water from a distant spring, never using piped city water, prepared mola salsa, that is, the salted grain used in sacrifices, and presided over major festivals such as the Vestalia in June, when the temple was open to the public and mules were honored. Yet their lives were far from austere. The Vestals resided in the luxurious Atrium Vesti, a complex of elegant rooms and courtyards. They enjoyed privileges unmatched by any other Roman women, or even most men. They could own and dispose of property freely, make wills without a guardian, give testimony without oath, and ride in a carpentum carriage through the city, preceded by lictors. They held the best seats at games and theaters, and most astonishingly, a Vestal could pardon a condemned criminal simply by touching him or crossing his path on the way to execution, an act that instantly freed him. As personae sui juris, they were sacrosanct. Harming a Vestal was punishable by death. The chief Vestal, the Virgo Vestalis Maxima, wielded immense influence, overseeing the college and even advising on state matters. In a society that tightly controlled women, the Vestals stood as exceptions. They were powerful, respected, and untouchable, guardians of Rome's sacred center. At the heart of their power lay the absolute vow of chastity. Upon initiation, each Vestal swore to remain a virgin for the full 30 years of service, a pledge that made her not just a priestess, but a living embodiment of Rome's purity and divine favor. This chastity was no private matter. It was believed to safeguard the entire city. Any breach, known as incestum, was seen as a direct threat to the Pax Deorum, that is, the peace with the gods, potentially inviting famine, plague, defeat in war, or other calamities. The Romans tied the health of the state to the virtue of its women, and the Vestals represented that virtue in its purest, most visible form. Their virginity symbolized the unbroken continuity of Rome's hearth and home. Breaking the vow was not mere immorality. It was treason against the gods and the res publica. Most Vestals upheld their oath faithfully. After 30 years, they could retire with a generous pension and the freedom to marry, though many chose to remain in service or renew their vows. Some, like the long-serving Accia, presided for decades. Yet the possibility of violation always loomed, turning suspicion into terror. For when the flame of purity flickered, Rome itself felt the chill. Suspicion of unchastity rarely arose from direct evidence alone. In Roman thought, the gods themselves signaled when something was amiss in the sacred order. Prodigies, that is, strange natural phenomena like comets, lightning strikes, monstrous births, or the sacred fire dimming unexpectedly, were interpreted as divine warnings that a Vestal might have broken her vow. During times of crisis, such as military defeats, pestilence, or social unrest, these omens took on heightened meaning. The Sibylline books might be consulted. Haruspices, that is, diviners, examined entrails, often pointing to pollution in the Vestal college. Slave testimony, rumors of improper behavior, lavish dress, or even excessive laughter could trigger investigation. The Vestal's visibility made them vulnerable. Any perceived deviation from strict modesty, such as a bold joke, extravagant clothing, or close association with men, invited scrutiny. In an era when female sexuality was tightly policed, these signs turned personal conduct into a matter of public and divine security, setting the stage for accusation and trial. When omens or reports suggested unchastity, the process moved swiftly. The Pontifex Maximus convened the College of Pontifices to hear the case. Unlike ordinary courts, it was a religious inquiry, not a public spectacle. Evidence ranged from direct testimony, often from slaves or freedmen, to circumstantial signs like neglected duties, improper attire, or associations with men. The accused Vestal was summoned before the pontifices. Trials were secretive, held within the sacred college, and focused on whether the vow had been broken, a crime of incestum that endangered the state. Evidence included witness statements and sometimes oracular pronouncements. Prodigies played a key role. A lightning strike or eclipse might be seen as confirmation of guilt. In rare cases, the Vestal could prove innocence through ordeal, as with Tuccia, who miraculously carried water in a sieve from the Tiber to demonstrate her purity. But most proceedings were grave affairs, especially during national crises, when the Vestals risked becoming scapegoats for Rome's misfortunes. If suspicion hardened into probable guilt, the pontifices rendered a verdict, one that could lead to the most horrific punishment in Roman religion. Acquittals were possible, but guilty findings triggered execution, a bloodless death designed to appease the gods without spilling sacred blood. These procedures underscored the unique status of the Vestals. Their trials were about restoring cosmic order, not just punishing crime. Throughout Roman history, convictions for incestum were rare. Only about 10 are recorded over a millennium. Yet each sent shockwaves through the city, often coinciding with periods of crisis. Early cases include Minutia in 337 BCE, buried alive for excessive adornment and slave testimony, and the dramatic 114 to 113 BCE scandal, where Emilia, Licinia, and Marcia were accused of multiple liaisons. Emilia was executed immediately. The others acquitted at first, then retried and buried alive after fresh prodigies, leading to additional human sacrifices. The most infamous imperial case came under Domitian, who condemned several Vestals in the late 1st century CE. The chief Vestal Cornelia, acquitted once but later convicted in 91 CE, was buried alive despite her protests of innocence, a stark example of imperial severity. These trials reveal how unchastity accusations often intertwined with politics, religion, and scapegoating, turning the Vestal's purity into a barometer of Rome's fate. For a Vestal found guilty of incestum, the punishment was designed to be both terrible and ritually pure. She could not be killed outright, as shedding her blood would pollute the city. Instead came the ancient rite of immuration, that is, live burial. The condemned was stripped of her sacred insignia, dressed as if for a funeral, and carried in a litter through the forum amid public mourning. At the Campus Celeratus near the Colline Gate, a small underground chamber awaited, sealed with earth once she descended, furnished only with a lamp, a bed, bread, water, and milk. Left to starve slowly in darkness, her death was voluntary, in appearance, avoiding direct bloodshed. Her alleged lover, if identified, faced public scourging to death in the forum or comitium. Lesser offenses, like letting the fire out, brought whipping. These brutal penalties reinforced the sacred bond between the Vestal's chastity and Rome's survival. The Vestal trials were more than isolated punishments. They reflected deep Roman anxieties about purity, gender, and divine favor. When prodigies struck or disasters loomed, the Vestals became convenient scapegoats, their supposed failings blamed for Rome's troubles, allowing the community to restore order through ritual expiation. The order's existence highlighted contradictions in Roman society. Women with unparalleled independence, yet bound by the strictest control over their bodies. Their chastity symbolized the state's integrity, making any breach a threat to the collective. Trials often exposed political rivalries, as accusations targeted elite families. Some emperors also used the trials to assert moral authority. Ultimately, the Vestals embodied Rome's ideal of the sacred feminine, powerful yet contained, and their ordeals revealed how religion and power intertwined in the ancient world. As the Roman Empire evolved, the Vestal order gradually faded. Christian emperors like Gratian in 382 CE confiscated their revenues, weakening the cult. The sacred fire burned on for a time, but Theodosius I's decrees against paganism in the 390s CE sealed its fate. The last known chief Vestal, Coelia Concordia, is attested around 385 CE. By 394 CE, pagan rituals were formally suppressed, and the eternal flame was extinguished forever. The house of the Vestals fell into ruin, its priestesses scattered or absorbed into the new Christian order. The end of the Vestals marked the close of an era, the final extinguishing of a flame that had burned for over 1,000 years, guarding Rome's hearth and heart. The Vestal Virgin sex trials stand as one of history's most haunting intersections of religion, power, and gender. These rare but terrifying events reveal a society that tied its very existence to the chastity of 6 women, priestesses who were both exalted and imprisoned by their sacred role. From the mythic origins under Numa to the brutal executions under emperors like Domitian, the story of the Vestals reminds us how ancient Rome viewed purity as essential to survival. Their privileges were extraordinary, their punishments unimaginable, and the trials themselves often reflected deeper fears about instability, divine anger, and control. In the end, the Vestal Virgins were more than priestesses. They were living symbols of Rome's soul, fragile, powerful, and eternally watched. Their legacy endures as a profound lesson in the ancient world's complex relationship with female sexuality, religious devotion, and the price of perfection. If this deep dive into the dramatic world of ancient Rome has captured your imagination, hit that subscribe button now to become part of the Ancient Odyssey community. Turn on notifications so you never miss our next exploration of history's greatest mysteries. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.